Imagine you can walk into a restaurant where you get to pay once and order food as many times as possible. And that is not all. Each time you make a request for a new meal, you get to pick a new chef to prepare the food. Remember, you only pay once and you can order as many times as possible. The urge of people to keep ordering for more is the same with AI users when they keep sending in prompt after prompt without being conscious of their actions. And this is the reason why most of the companies responsible for these AI models like Anthropic, OpenAI, and the likes put restrictions to usage. And in most cases, you see they talk about you have reached your token limit. So in this video, you get to understand what AI tokens are, why they exist, why you cannot get unlimited, and the best practice towards minimizing usage. Let's get right into it. So what are AI tokens? So let us put these into a simple perspective. AI tokens are text that your AI models can understand. We keep sending prompts in different forms, in different languages. So instead of it to keep digesting all of these prompts, it converts them into a format that it can understand and process well, fast, and more efficiently. So why do they exist? Paint the scenario of a bodybuilder who needs 5 grams of creatine. So the normal practice to getting 5 grams of creatine from food is to eat something like a kilogram to 1.5 kilogram of steak. So the bodybuilder can decide to consume that enormous, massive plate of food to get 5 grams of creatine, or just take a tablespoon of creatine powder that gives the same 5 grams of creatine, which is going to be digested faster and which is going to take action very, very fast. This is the same way AI system works. So instead of consuming our prompt word for word, which end up being massive, complicated for it to even process very fast, which would end up making it respond very slow. It's rather break it down into tokens, which it can understand better, which it can process faster. And with that, it makes its response very fast whenever we send in our prompt. So why then do we run out of token? You do because you use them up. So AI tokens are unlike every other forms of subscriptions you do, like your Netflix, your YouTube Premium, where you get to subscribe and then get to watch as many movies as possible before the month ends. So for token, it works differently because you get allocated certain amount of token and each token is deducted based on the task you perform. If you don't perform every task, they deduct it little by little. But if you perform every task, they deduct it massively. So you run out of token because you use them up. You get token allocation on your payment and you use them up based on how complicated your task is. Simple explanation to that is airtime. You buy airtime, you get the chance to call people as much as your airtime can allow. If you buy airtime worth a certain amount of money, when you make your first call, you get a level of deduction from your airtime balance. And then when you make another call, you get deduction. And if peradventure, if you make a very long call, you can exhaust the whole airtime balance in one go. So that is the way AI token works. So you use your AI tokens up because you perform tasks that requires high usage, or you have done so much work that then deduct everything off your balance. So now, why can we not get unlimited access even if we need to pay certain amount of money before the month you get to use token as much as possible? The number one reason why this is impossible is because you pay per token. That is, for every payment you make payment for a certain amount of token. And the reason is if company leaves it unlimited, each time you send in a prompt, you are costing them money. So if they make it unlimited, it then becomes a loss for them because for every usage, there's always a cost implication. So the best thing for them, the best practice is to try as much as possible to charge you on the go, not just once and then you get unlimited. It wouldn't be profitable for them. 2, hardware and electricity. AI models do not just appear out of nowhere. They run on GPUs and these hardwares cost a whole lot of money. So it is important that they put the best chips in place, and this costs enormous amount of money. And these are not just chips that work on their own. These are chips that consume a lot of power, which then requires electricity, constant electricity. It draws a lot of electricity, and such electricity bill is also enormous. And anything that consumes power at that level would eat up really fast. So it is important that they put in cooling system in place as well, which cost money again. So all of these combined together cost the company a lot of money. The data centers they use, the skilled people who are in charge of operating it, maintaining it, and keep it active and running get paid as well. So if you compound all of these amounts, it then becomes non-profitable if you get the chance to use it unlimited. And the third and one of the most important reason is to prevent overusage and server meltdown. I painted the scenario of a restaurant at the beginning of the video. If we have access to an unlimited tool, we get to use it without being conscious of the cost implication at the end of the complaint. So we keep sending in prompts, even if it had already answered our question. We keep sending in such prompts every single time. And most people would even overuse it while not using it for something very important. So it's a way for the company to reduce the rate at which people use excessively. Now imagine a guy who has a vision of building a mobile app that can change the world. If such a person get access to unlimited plan, he or she would use it in excess vibe code throughout the entire day. Would even put his vibe coding on automation that even when he's not seated in his workspace, he keeps working. Imagine have millions of that kind of a person. Server will end up melting down. The server will end up becoming useless in most cases because now if people keep using, the company needs to keep maintaining, the company needs to keep paying for more electricity bill. The company needs to keep putting bigger infrastructures in place because now they have millions of people using it every second. And now imagine people are not paying frequently and they need to keep upgrading their system. At the end of the day, they will run out of money and then the model will become unusable because now their whole infrastructure is down and they are broke to even maintain or improve it. So these are one of the reasons why we cannot get unlimited plan to these AI models. So there's always a restriction no matter the plan you paid for. So now that we know why we cannot get unlimited, what are the practices we can pick up to ensure that we minimize usage? The most important way is to try as much as possible not to compound conversation in a single chat. Because like I said earlier, for each prompt, there's a token it takes. It consumes a certain amount of token. And for the response it gives you, it consumes a certain amount of token as well. So when you type in the first prompt, detailed, it will probably remove about 1,000 token. And when it responds, maybe 1,000 token or less. By the time you are on the 20th conversation, remember it has to keep reading every line every single time you ask it a question. Let's go back to the beginning of the conversation, read through to the last conversation. And this is to understand context and so it doesn't hallucinate. So it keeps reading all over again. So each time it goes back to the beginning of the conversation to read down, the token it consumes compounds. So instead of just consuming maybe 500 tokens for that single line of prompt, it then consumes close to 10,000. Coupled with this response, consume about 15,000 tokens in one go. So if you keep up with that pace and you keep sending in more prompts and chatting with it in that same chat, it consumes everything really fast. You might be surprised to only do just one thing and then you have exhausted everything. So the best practice is to, at first, ensure your prompt, your initial prompt, is as detailed as possible. Try as much as possible to give it context and try as much as possible to make sure you put everything in detail so it doesn't have to start making research or hallucinating and then giving wrong response, which will end up making you keep sending in more prompts for clarification. So your first prompt should be detailed and well explanatory in this sense. Within 2, 3, 4 prompts, you should be done with the whole conversation. You have to go further, try as much as possible to be conscious of usage. And then one thing I have come to realize over time while using different AI models is that most of them understand context and they also have memory. So if you start a new chat and you tell it about the previous conversation you had, it can remember, and then you can continue the conversation through that means. If you don't really believe that, you can always tell within that same conversation that it should summarize everything, ensuring that it's mentioned every important detail, and then you copy the summary, you take it to a new chat, and then you continue. Though at some point, the models itself will suggest to you to continue from a new chat, but it would always do that when it is already extreme. So before you get extreme, it's important that you take note of it and start a new conversation. So there are several other methods you can use to minimize usage, to minimize every usage. But then I'll stop at this. I hope you learned something today. And I would love that you share this to as many people as possible so they can learn too. So for more videos like this, like, comment, share, and hit the subscribe button. See you on the next one. Arigato.